Why do you want to reinvent yourself? The reason why asking yourself that question is so important is it kind of tells you where exactly you're starting from. Hello everyone, how are you guys doing? How was your first week of January so far? Are the vibes vibing? Like, how are we feeling? This week's theme happened to be reinventing yourself. Last week we did a complete set on self-discipline and everything like that. I know it's kind of strange to talk about reinventing yourself after talking about self-discipline, but originally I was gonna do the theme of discomfort and motivation, but then I thought, what if I applied those things when talking about reinventing yourself? I don't know about y'all, but I've seen so much, like hundreds and millions of videos all on this topic. I wanted to try to bring a new perspective to this topic, just for a video outline of what we're going to talk about. Granted that reinventing yourself is actually a very overwhelming topic, but I also think that many of the videos that are currently out there don't address the psychology of motivation. And also, this is just a reminder that you can't rely on motivation alone to want to change and reinvent yourself. But I do believe that motivation, in a sense, is like the kickstart, the jumpstart to going for your goals. But if you want to learn how to continue with your goals, to achieve your goals, I would suggest watching last week's video on self-discipline. All those links will be in the description. So without further ado, let's get into the video. What does it mean to reinvent yourself? Like I said, many videos have talked about this countless of times, but I made a list of the topics they traditionally address in these videos. First thing people always address is personal style. And the way they talk about personal style is kind of different depending on what channel you watch. I've seen someone mention Kibby body type. I've seen other people saying they use astrology to elevate their style, such as dressing for your Venus sign to attract love, dressing for your rising sign to show your most authentic self, dressing for your Mars or dressing for your Lilith sign for a sense of power or rebellion. And then of course they go into makeup. So they talk about either skin tones and undertones, which is very important when creating a makeup look because it relates to color theory. Also, understanding what your face shape is. If you're a low visual or a high visual, this is actually something I've seen the most on TikTok with glow up content. I don't know if it was brought here. It kind of is focused on like the facial features, and it kind of tells you if heavy makeup will look good on you or if you're meant for a more light makeup look, which is so interesting because when I was more into the beauty sense, that when I put on makeup, I always hated contour on me, because I do miss the wow colors of the 2010s makeup, specifically like 2016 and stuff like that. But I know that that makeup look did not look good on me. Anyways, continuing on with skin types. So if you have dry skin, oily skin, that also is something to consider in your makeup as well as skincare, because it affects the type of products that will work well on you. And in terms of eyeshadow, it kind of talks about shades that work with your eye color. Again, this color theory and stuff like that, like what brings out your eyes. Because when people talk about reinventing themselves, a lot of times they're talking about enhancing your features. The concept, they talk about habits they adapted. And I compiled a list based on the many videos I watch. So a lot of times it's drinking more water, doing something to be active daily movement, and finding what works for you in that aspect. Although a lot of times many people are going with trends, and many people suggest things like yoga or Pilates or running. But if you are not interested in those things and you'll have resistance to doing those things daily, then it doesn't make sense for you, and you should find movement that you actually enjoy and that works with your personal preference. Continuing on with the list is finding an organization system. I think this is one of the most important things you do when reinventing yourself. Developing a reset routine, either a weekly reset or a monthly reset, making the time to review your goals and create new ones for the upcoming month if you do it monthly or a quarterly basis. So it's really dependent on what you prefer and what you can manage. A journaling routine, habits to romanticize your life, drinking bone broth. Someone suggested eating breakfast within an hour of waking up, switching from coffee to matcha, reading psychology-based books, philosophy-based books, finance-based books, and a lot of people also mentioned taking 10,000 steps a day. As for mindset work, many people listed lucky girl syndrome, treating yourself better to raise your standards, living in the present, writing down big goals with concrete steps. And then obviously hygiene routines, which is like your everything showers, and your maintenance day routines, and finding a signature scent. People also mentioned their finances and also ways they elevated their environment. Many videos focus on self-concept and actions. Granted, that's very important, but here's the space I think so many creators that talk about lifestyle and everything like that miss. I'm gonna ask you a question, and I want you to really think about it. Why do you want to reinvent yourself? The reason why asking yourself that question is so important is it kind of tells you where exactly you're starting from. I am in the process of reinventing myself, but this is like reinvention 2.0. I would say the first time I tried to reinvent myself was 5 years ago. I'm 22 now. When I tried to reinvent myself, I was just graduating from high school. I got into my dream college, and that was the first time I had the urge to really reinvent myself. Because I do think the way I was trying to change myself in high school was not sustainable. But I think the real first reinvention I had of myself was going into college. If I was to answer that question 5 years ago at 17 years old, I would say something along the lines like this. I want to reinvent myself because I need to be someone else. I need to be someone successful to prove people wrong. I need to prove that my suffering in high school was worth it and that I was always made to be someone special. That was my thought process at 17 years old. And if I was to answer that question now, at my age, in this exact moment, how I'm answering this question is, the way I'm living doesn't support my vision of myself. Reinventing myself doesn't feel like I'm trying to be someone else, but I'm just aligning with my future self. If you listen to the way I said both of those things, there is a huge difference. Why you want to change can show you how you can shift your identity and shift yourself. Reinventing myself the first time, I had to do a lot of healing, but the me now that already went through those stages of emotions, the stages of unlearning and everything like that, that is so different than reinventing myself from this point on. Because I learned how to be more supportive of myself. I learned what my version of success feels right to me. And the things I'm doing is not for anyone else but myself. I don't know how else to say this or how else to explain it, but when you are doing it completely for you, which at some point is hard for you if you were a people pleaser in some sense, that learning how to do it for just yourself is so, I can't think of the word. It's just something different, you know? The vibes are different, how you approach it is different, and your patience when shifting your identity is so different. And it's easier for you to create a sustainable plan because of that. Okay, all I'm trying to say is my take on this, there's a difference of what you have to do to reinvent yourself when you come from, for example, a supportive family versus an unsupportive family. There's a difference on what you have to do and how you have to think based on like the nuances of your character and personhood, I guess. Like if you're neurotypical versus neurodivergent, how you have to reinvent yourself is so different. How you have to reinvent yourself coming from a place of self-hatred versus self-neutrality is so different if you've always had a sense of self-love for yourself. But this is just your reminder, there is no shame wherever you're starting at. All you need to do is tell yourself that this is a temporary phase, because it's a proven fact. The only thing that's inevitable in this world is change. And while I think the why you're doing this should definitely be the first step, because it's something you're always going to go back to, I'm not saying the who do you want to be isn't as important. If you could describe your most ideal way of living, what would that person do to feel excited to wake up every day? How would that person describe themselves in 3 to 5 words? What actions does that person do to support that they are those things? What emotions does that person feel on a regular basis? When that person introduces themselves to new people, what aspect of their lives do they discuss? What is that person's version of success, and where does it stem from? When you think about that, what are 3 to 5 words you would use to describe your current self? Are they any similar to the words you would use to describe your ideal person? This is a controversial take. I don't think when you're reinventing yourself, you always have to become someone new. There are ways to change yourself and kind of like respecting the past versions of you and still changing what you need to in order to be that person. I think there are qualities that we always had, you know, but it's just because we're not seeing ourselves fully and seeing our light fully that we don't acknowledge them. I also think you can have qualities about your past self that you want to keep. Like, I think something about my past self, even though I hated myself in high school, and I say that very calmly, but as I started to grow more neutral with myself, I also realized that something cool about my past self, even though she struggled with seeing the good in herself, one good thing about her is she was very intentional in just simply like the way she dressed and did makeup, and was very, like, I guess, analytical about who she wanted to be. Even though I wasn't in my most powerful time because of my mindset, that is still a quality I want to carry on when I reinvent myself. I want to carry on my childlike creativity that I've had since I was younger and bring that into when I reinvent myself. Because I don't think the reinvention of yourself is necessarily a new person, but like the enhanced good qualities of who you already are. And of course, there are some areas of your life you completely just want to change, and that's completely fine. But I don't think you have to hate yourself entirely and disrespect the past versions of you to do that. Let's get into how to reinvent yourself with low motivation or no motivation. Keep in mind, again, this is not about accomplishing your goals. This is about just getting started in the process. As I stated already, you can't rely on motivation, like, at all. Motivation is very fickle, and from my research, they did say that motivation also stems from dopamine, the thing that releases in your brain, like the chemical. So if that's the thing, and it also relies on that way of your brain functioning, it's not gonna be for everyone that they can really rely on motivation. It does take a while to build discipline. So when I repeatedly do these things, and because of how I see my days as like repeatedly a fresh start and how I break down my days, so I think of my days in 4 parts. So I think of certain hours as like a new start. And I do think that's number 1 of having motivation, is kind of constantly thinking of things as a fresh start does help me a lot. I don't know if a lot of people do that. Maybe it's just a me thing, I don't know. I feel like not enough people talk about this, but going back to your goals frequently. So if you're a visual person, I feel like a vision board does help you the most. So making sure you have a place where you constantly see your vision and stuff like that. But another way, and something you can do, is like when you write your to-do list or when you're doing your journaling practice, if you have one, write your goals. The goal that you decided on to work on for like 12 weeks. And I am personally trying the 12-week year thing because everyone has sworn by it. And I did like it when I tried it. Okay, so like I was saying, I did like it when I started to try it last year, but one thing I did feel like I wasn't implementing it as properly as I could have. So I'm trying it again, and this time going very hard in my goals because I actually am reading the book that was suggested, so I'm following their structure completely. I always suggest never having more than 3 goals you're working on at a time, because another thing with reinventing yourself, I do think that what causes people to have low motivation, they overwhelm themselves in the process where it becomes kind of too much. So make sure to constantly write your goals, because in your head, if you keep thinking about them, if you see yourself like, oh, these are my goals, then with your to-do list, you could say like, what do I need to do to support these goals, right? And that's something you can ask yourself. And then from there, if your goals are too big and you get overwhelmed by all the tasks you have to do, make sure to break down the tasks into smaller bits that you can handle, and make sure to do that based on your energy level. And I did talk about this. That's why you have your morning menu and your evening/night menu or whatever. Because that's one thing that personally helps me, is I do try to do like my harder things in the morning, which it is realistic for me right now. But I'm gonna be so real that you're probably gonna have to make sacrifices and really swap things out if your lifestyle doesn't support doing things at any and every time. Like, some people have jobs and they work at a certain point of days. Some people mostly work night shifts, some people work all morning shifts, some people have to get up really early for work, or some people have a long commute, some people take public transportation, some people drive. So you really have to understand how to structure yourself to support you. And I do think it does help that when I visualize, because I do practice visualization a lot, I do both positive visualization and negative visualization. And I know that's a controversial take, because especially in the self-help wellness community, they say to focus on the positive, focus on what you want to manifest and stuff like that. I'm not 100% on board with that, but I do think that you need to have a strong sense of emotional awareness if you're going to use negative visualization. So what I use positive visualization is, I think of my future self. I think about the things she does and feel and everything I talked about earlier. But in terms of the negative visualization, I think about feelings I've had in the past. Like, for example, one of my biggest goals, I've talked about this way too many times, but is my health goals and everything like that. So whenever I don't feel like working out, I think about that time when I was going to school, and every time I walked, I felt so heavy, and I hated it. I hated that I felt overly heated in my jackets, that my asthma was constantly triggered, that my back was hurting. I felt like I shouldn't have that as a 20-something-year-old, you know? a young 20-something-year-old too, like a newly 20-year-old. So it's like, I never want to feel like that again. If I exercise, I won't feel like that. And that's kind of how I reason with myself. Not everyone can do that. I think when some people focus on the negative, quote unquote, is what they dwell on. But I do think it does take mental strength to do both. If I really don't feel like getting up, one thing I make sure to do is positive content consumption for like 10 to 20 minutes. Specifically, this is when I listen to podcasts, audiobooks, or simply just scrolling on Pinterest, because Pinterest is like top tier for my motivation. So the reason why this works for me is because then I start getting reminded of all the things I want. Oh, if this person can do that, so can I. But I also think in order to think like that, you kind of have to get rid of the sense of feeling inferior for someone for not doing something. That can also be something that demotivates you. Is like when you see someone doing something, you're kind of like, how can this be obtainable for me? And I think that internalized thinking ruins your motivation. So again, the mental state is so important for motivation, which is why when it comes to motivation, I think it's so important to have like a mental diet, because this is what I kind of call that. I did mention this one. The fifth thing I said was breaking down tasks, and I did put like the example of looking at the step and not the whole staircase. Kind of basic, kind of cliche, but I did mention that already, so I'm not going to go that into that one. Pairing hard tasks with things that are fun to do. So when I was struggling the most, one thing that did help me is like pairing it with something that I found like relaxing and fun. So even though now what I do when I use like my stepping machine to work out, I now like watch like YouTube videos, especially motivational content. But before to even get me to do it, I kind of bargained with myself like, okay, I can watch this Netflix show, I can watch this K-drama, but I have to watch it while using the stepper. And then I didn't want to get off. You kind of have to add your favorite things. Or like when I'm cleaning up, I have a bunch of cleaning playlists to help me like get into the vibes of wanting to clean. And the last one I think was the biggest help when with my motivational toolbox or whatever, is I got rid of the all or nothing mindset. That mindset that I used to have was such a killer motivation, because then I had like this sense of like, why try if it's not going to result in the way I wanted to? So I had to just get rid of that mindset because it was killing my motivation, it was killing my energy. Basically, you have to be okay with doing things imperfectly, and you also have to see value in everything you do. Like, it's not what you do is valuable, is because you're doing it type vibes. And a lot of these are mindset shifts. It may work, it may not, but the thing is, mindset is the biggest thing that has to shift if you're reinventing yourself. One last thing, I forgot to write this one down. I do something that helps hold me accountable. With doing tasks for the future version of myself, I did start following the 12-week year, and one thing they did say was to keep a scoreboard. This will work if you're someone that has been competitive about grades and everything. Basically, how it works is like, what I did is I have 15 things I need to do each week, right? That I said are my strategies in order to support my goals. Simple, right? So I did it last week for the first time since it was the first week of January. And when I calculated how much points, and you have to be honest with yourself with this, I got a 45%. I was upset, and that really just made me want to do better because I need to beat that score, right? So turn what you want to do into a game, or kind of like act out the hard things as a reality show, because that's why sometimes I try to film myself doing things, because then it's like, oh, I'm going to post this, I'm going to have people see my life, kind of triggers something to force me to have accountability. But if you're too private for that, you can also make a bet with someone close to you and have them hold you accountable. Because I do think that some people need people. For me, it's enough to kind of like challenge myself in a way and keep it like a scoreboard or like record myself in some shape or form. But those are the things that really has helped me when I do have low motivation. There is one more topic that I don't remember if I mentioned in the beginning with reinventing yourself. And I want to talk about this given that we're talking about motivation, is the resistance to change versus knowing when something is not right for yourself. So I actually spoke about the resistance to change this morning in what I've recorded for my podcast episode. So I'm gonna mostly focus on knowing when something is wrong for you, because I do think the biggest motivation killer when it comes to reinventing yourself is when you're not doing things or prioritizing the right things for you. I've done things, I've accomplished things, and I accomplished things that I said I was going to, but at the end of the day, they don't feel like accomplishments to me. I have a clear vision of when I graduated from college. This might be a very controversial thing for me to say, but I have to speak my truth. I cannot feel accomplished if I get a job. It's not what makes me feel accomplished, because whenever I think of my future self, she does not work for anyone. She does her own thing. She has her own businesses. I just feel like if I do work for someone else, it's always gonna feel like a side quest to me. It's never gonna feel completely right for me. My thing is, I have tunnel vision whenever I do something. That's why when I was in school, I prioritized getting good grades, because then in my head it's like, why am I in school if I'm not gonna give it my all? And again, this kind of relates to the all or nothing mindset. I will always prioritize things out of a scarcity mindset, and it's always been that way. It's been that way with my grades, it's been that way with a job. There's a difference between the resistance of change versus knowing when something is wrong for you. With resistance to change, it's kind of just like there are things you need to get over, but the overall idea of what you're doing excites you. It makes you feel inspired. It makes you feel like the hard things about whatever you're doing is worth it. But you also have to learn how to get through the discomfort of it. While when something is wrong for you, you don't feel excited, and that's when demotivation hits the hardest. When you have low motivation, make sure to really check if it's because you're just feeling discomfort with the change, or if something is wrong for you. Whether you're lying to yourself about what you really want because you see the things people talk about and the things your parents expect of you or your friends expect of you or whatever, and you're just trying to fulfill some obligation, fulfill validation. So if you have low motivation when reinventing yourself, you can try some of the tools. But honestly, I think the best thing you can do is getting to the root, which takes a lot of awareness and it takes so much honesty. I also think that if you have low motivation, one of the most important things you can do is be patient with yourself, get to the root of what's causing it, and if you need to, seek some form of professional help if it is depression or something of the sort. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, subscribe, or better yet, share if you enjoy it. I would really appreciate the support. And until next time, bye!